nanotechnology with saying the world is very small, and this very small world has lots of potential in the recent technology that called as a nanotechnology. Let us now discuss what is a nanoparticle. The nanoparticle may be nanoparticulate materials, nanocapsules, ultrafine aerosols, nanoparticles, quantum dots, nanotubes, and we can in general say the nanostructures. Let us now discuss the origin. The origin may be natural, unintentionally released, and specially manufactured nanoparticles can be possible. The chemical composition of these nanoparticles would be metals, metal oxides. It may be polymer or carbon material. It may include the semiconductors, biomolecules, and different compounds. The nanoparticles can be dispersed in gases, and it is called as aerosols. It can be dispersed in liquids, and we can form gels or ferrofluids, etc. We can disperse the nanoparticle in solid, and they can form a matrix material. Let us now discuss the different shape and structure of the nanoparticles. The shape of nanoparticles may be sphere, needles, platelets, tubes. For example, carbon nanotube, and for sphere we can take example of fullerenes. The surface modification can be possible in the nanoparticle. The surface modification may be categorized as untreated. Untreated means as it obtained in production process, we are using in similar way. Second is coated. We can coat different conjugates and polymer films onto the nanostructures, and that is how we can modify the surface of the nanoparticles. Next is the core or shell particles. So different core or shell particles such as spheres, nanocapsules, nanospheres, nanotubes can be possible. So different surface modification can also be possible in a nanoparticle. Let us now take one of the example. For this is a carbon bulky ball. Carbon bulky ball is dimensioned about 1 nanometer in diameter, and it contains the 60 carbon atoms linked together in one unit. It looks like a soccer ball, and that is why it is called as a carbon bulky ball. Let us now discuss the nano dimension. If we consider nano dimension, the ratio of diameter of earth to the diameter of football, it is having the 10 million ratio. Diameter of earth is 12,756 kilometer, and diameter of a normal football, playing football, is around 22 centimeter. So if we take the ratio of diameter of earth to the diameter of the football, it will around 10 million. So we can say the football is 10 million times smaller than the earth. And if we compare fullerenes, as I shown in previous slide, the diameter of fullerenes is around 1 nanometer, or if we measure accurately, it would be goes around 0.7 nanometer. So 0.7 nanometer if we consider, and if we take the ratio of diameter of football to the diameter of fullerenes, it is 1 billion times smaller than the football. So if we consider the fullerenes and diameter, it is the picture can show you the how much nano dimension is minute. If we consider nanometer, it is million times smaller than the smallest measurement you can see on the ruler. So it is 1 millionth part of the millimeter. Nanometer is the millionth of millimeter, or we can say it is a billionth part of a meter. If we take some examples, the nature derived things and man-made things, we can have the microscopic to nanoscopic scale. On left hand side, the picture shows the different things naturally evolved, and on right hand side we are having the things that we made, that is man-made things. Okay, so if we consider the ant is dimensioned around 5 millimeter. If we go on decreasing the size, the dust mite is size around 200 micrometers. Again, if we go back or go down on the scale, the fly ash particles, they are sized around 10 to 20 micrometer. If we take human hair, it is around 60 to 120 micrometer wide. And if we go down to the virus and DNA, it will again 10 nanometer in diameter. And if we consider DNA, the width between two helicals of the DNA is around 2 nanometer. So this is all about the natural things. If we consider the man-made things, the head of pin is 1 to 2 mm. Again, if we go down to microelectronic materials and different nanostructures derived, as we seen earlier, the carbon buckyball is having 1 nanometer diameter. So that is how we can we can distinguish the scale of things that is naturally derived and derived by man. So if we consider the different particles or different constituents, we can easily distinguish the size of the different atoms, as I mentioned in the left hand side of the table, and on right hand side I have taken the approximately dimension of that particular atom. So first atom is the width of an atom. So width of an atom is around 1 nanometer. If we consider the width across a DNA molecule, or the the distance across the two helicals is around 2 nanometers. The width of a wire in a computer or laptop is around 100 nanometers. The wavelength of ultraviolet light is 300 nanometer. If we consider the width of dust particle we regularly seen in suspended in air is around 800 nanometers. The length of some bacteria is around 1000 nanometers, and if we see the width of red blood cell in our blood is dimensioned around 10,000 nanometers. If we consider the width of human hair, it will be approximately sized from 75,000 to 1 lakh nanometers. If we consider the thickness of a newspaper sheet, it will dimensioned around 10,000 nanometers. And if we consider the head of pin or nail, it will around 10,000 nanometers. And if we consider the width across the nail of a little finger of human, it will around 1 crore nanometers. So that is how we can distinguish the different atoms and their size on nanoscale. So let us now discuss some interesting facts of nanoscale related to human beings. If we consider the man's beard, it will grow around 5 nanometer every second, and human hair is around 80,000 nanometer in diameter, as we discussed in previous table 2. And if we consider the human fingernail, it grows around 1 nanometer every second. So these are some interesting facts related to human beings. The nanotechnology is inspired from nature. If we see the beetle, fly, spider and gecko, They are having tendency to cling to the walls and walk on the ceilings. The highest adhesion forces are generally observed in geckos. A gecko is the heaviest animal that can stand on ceiling with its feet over its head. And this adhesive property is due to the on the sole of a gecko there are some million of tiny adhesive hairs as shown by purple color in this particular picture where I am pointing out. These tiny adhesive hairs are around 200 nanometers in both width and length. And the shape of the fiber is also significant. For example, the spatula shaped ends on the hairs provide the particularly strong adhesion, and that is why a gecko, that is the heaviest animal that can stand on a ceiling with its feet over its head. If we take the ancient examples of nanotechnology, nowadays we called it as nanotechnology, but the ancient people are also aware about the nanoparticles. A famous example is of Roman nanotechnology during the 4th century, and that is called as a Lycurgus cup as shown in the figure. If we consider the reflected light on this cup, the cup appears green in color as shown in the left hand side of this particular figure, and in transmitted light it appears red. The reason behind this change in color is due to the different nanoparticles that embedded in the silica glass. The 40 ppm gold nanoparticles and 300 ppm silver nanoparticles are embedded in silica glass, and we know that on nano scale the material behaves drastically and strange properties can be observed. At the same time, the light reflection is also different at nanoscale, and that is why the Lycurgus cup is a famous example of nanotechnology that researchers may interested in. Another famous example is of the stained glass. As shown in this figure, the 1000 years ago, gold nanoparticles were used for producing the stained glass. These stained glass were used in most of the European buildings, mostly in church. The red stained glass gets its color from gold nanoparticles of size 20 nanometer only, whereas the orange glass gets its color from the gold nanoparticles and that is in size of 80 nanometer. Another famous example of sulfide nanocrystals that used by Greeks and Romans to dye hair, and it was around 2000 years ago. If we consider the various historical milestones in nanotechnology, the colored glass by Roman, as just now we discussed, is found in 4th century. In similar era, the Lycurgus cup is also found. The church windows or stained glass is another famous example. In 9th to 17th centuries in Islamic world, the luster is used, and luster is also the well-known example of nanotechnology applications. In 16th century, the Italian Renaissance pottery is also another example of usage of nanoparticles and nanotechnology. From 13th to 18th centuries, Damascus is also used. That is also a renowned example of the nanotechnology. In 1857, Michael Faraday used the ruby nanoparticles for his research. In 1979, CRO is developed. In 1895, X-ray diffraction is invented. Later, in 1928, Raman spectroscopy is invented. In 1937, scanning electron microscope is evolved. Later, in 1938, TEM transmission electron microscope is evolved. Again, in 1969, XPS, and in 1981, STM, that is scanning tunneling microscope, is developed by the company IBM. And in 1982, atomic force microscope is also developed by IBM. If we consider the nanotechnology, Dr. Richard Fenman is known as is said to be the father of nanotechnology. He gave the insight and the idea and concept behind the nanoscience and nanotechnology. He gave an insight in his talk entitled There is Plenty of Room at the Bottom. And this talk is in the American Physical Society meeting at California Institute of Technology held on 29 December 1959. In his speech, Dr. Fenman elaborated a process in which scientists would be able to manipulate and control individual atoms and molecules. His insight is really give the insight for researchers to work in this direction. Dr. Richard Fenman also stated that why cannot we write the entire 24 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica on the head of a pin? By this statement, he is exploring the huge and vast scope of nanotechnology over a head of pin, which is measured around 1 to 2 millimeter. The Dr. Richard Fenman is one of the America's most notable physicists, worked during 1918 to 1988. Over a decade later, that is in 1974, Professor Norio Taniguchi of Tokyo Science University used the term nanotechnology for the first time to describe the science and technology of processing or building parts with nanometric tolerance. In 1981, as we already discussed, IBM develops the scanning tunneling microscope. With this development, the modern nanotechnology era began. This microscope is able to allow the manipulation of the individual atoms and molecules in the field of nanotechnology. In 1985, buckyball, the scientists at Rice University and University of Sussex discovered the fullerenes, and it consists of 60 carbon atoms arranged in a sphere that made up of 12 pentagons and 20 hexagons. It looks like a soccer ball. In 1991, the carbon nanotube is discovered by S. Lijima. Why we have to use nanotechnology or nanoscience? At the nanoscale, the strange things happen to materials and their properties, maybe physical or chemical properties, that change drastically. The first property we are going to discuss is reactivity. As the particles get smaller, they tend to react differently with their environment than the larger particles. Second property is size. Smaller particles can have different optical or different properties like the optical properties. Their colors change because of the different size of particles reflect and absorb light differently. Next is the magnetic property. Smaller particles can have different magnetic properties than the larger particles. If we consider this example of sugar cubes and sugar crystals, and if we ask which one dissolves in water first, obviously the answer is sugar crystals, because the more surface area of sugar crystal is exposed to the water than the sugar cubes, and that is why the sugar crystals are readily dissolved
in water than the sugar cubes. And the same underlying principle of nanotechnology can be used here. There are two articles, interesting articles on Nano Dimension were published. Magical point of length scale for this is the point where the smallest man-made devices meet atoms and molecules of the natural world. This statement is given by Eugene Wang on 8 November 1999 in Knight Rider newspaper. Second article is published and is stated by R. Smalley in summer 1999 in congressional hearings. He stated that just wait, the next century is going to be incredible. We are about to able to build the things that work at smallest possible length scales, atom by atom. These little nano things will revolutionize our industries and our lives. So these two famous statements can give the insight of the nano dimension and nanoparticles. Let us now discuss the definitions of nanotechnology. The nanotechnology is the understanding and control of matter at dimensions of roughly 1 to 100 nanometers, where unique phenomena enable the novel applications. Second definition is given by National Nanotechnology Initiative 2007. It stated nanotechnology as encompassing nanoscale science, engineering, and technology. The nanotechnology involves imaging, measuring, modeling, and manipulating matter at this length scale. The professor Norio Taniguchi also stated nanotechnology as nanotechnology mainly consists of processing of separation, consolidation, and deformation of materials by one atom or one molecule. Overall, the nanotechnology or nanoscience is the study and application of extremely small things and can be used across all other science fields such as chemistry, biology, physics, material science, and engineering, or various engineering branches like electrical, mechanical, electronics, chemical, etc. Different nanomaterials and nanotechnology are mentioned over here: nanocrystalline materials, nanoparticles, nanocapsules, nanoporous material, nanofiber, nanowire, fluorescence or buckyballs, nanotubes, nanosprings, nanobelts, dendrimers, photolithography, nanolithography. These are the various schemes or technology